Okay, we will call the meeting to order. The Board of Selectmen meeting on October 25th, 2022 at 6:30. Roll call, myself, Bob Carlson, the first selectman, Selectwoman Nicole Porter, and Selectman Brett Mastriani are all present, as well as our Admin and Finance Director, Christine Dias. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Is there any public comment? I see there's people on the screen. Any hands up, Christine? Okay, is there any comments by either of the two selectmen?
Yeah, I just want to ask that we put on our next agenda. I know that we talked about the purchasing policy, and I know that Donnie had some concerns about issues with the dollar value for his department. So I think maybe if we can put that on our next agenda and discuss it and see if we come to some kind of resolution.
That sounds good. And maybe we can
Nicole,
have,
just for your background, basically Donnie said that the cutoff of the dollar value of what 1,500 is too low for his department. So certain things just cause him to not be able to get stuff done. So I said that I would look into other towns and how they handle public works department and see if there's any variables there.
and Christy, maybe we can invite Donnie to that meeting to explain. Thanks. Okay, anything else?
I just want to thank everybody that helped out with the light parade. And Nicole, you did a great job getting everybody lined up and all the other volunteers. But I have to say, it was so nice to see the attendance and, people even from surrounding towns that came. I think it's a great event, and I want to thank Jen Strunk for doing that, and I look forward to next year.
Yeah, so on my way out that night, I did have a chance to talk with, Donnie was there actually chatting with our two, the resident troopers that were there. They did, I think, and I can pass this feedback on to Jen, but if it got any bigger than what it was this year, they felt that they really needed, potentially some additional resources there. So we were thrilled with it. There were a couple of things that I'm sure we'll debrief on how it went, but just it was big for him. And we had the issue of people crossing Route 2 at the elementary school and not specifically using the tunnel.
Yeah.
So that just,
I think he cornered all of us on
Yeah.
our way out
Yeah.
to make
and
bring the
they
message
were just
home.
concerned. They said, great to see everybody out. It was at one point I was kind of looking at downtown Main Street, and it was really
Have you
nice
seen
to
the
see.
video yet?
I have the one like oh my gosh. Yeah, what a nice job they did. Yeah, it was great.
So yeah, if we can address those security concerns, because people running across Route 2,
Yeah.
that's crazy. So
Yep.
I guess if you guys can all sit down and figure out a way to make it nice. It is a nice draw for our residents, our local small businesses that caters to, and just a nice feel.
Yeah, definitely.
Great, thanks. Is that it for that? Okay. First selectman report in correspondence. I have two correspondence. One I gave you, which is on the Pawcatuck Neighborhood Center. It just was a kind of what they've done with the money they received. I thought if you save this, it'll come in handy when we talk about the budget and budget season, when we bring up, organizations that we give money to. So since they sent it to me, I wanted to make sure you guys had a copy of it. I would just stick it away for now and bring it back out during budget season, because they're gonna ask, as they normally do, for money from the town, and it makes sense that we give them the money that we give them. So secondly, and we'll address this again under vacancies and appointments, but I got a letter from Bill Ricker. This is from Antoinette. Bill has sent her a letter indicating that at last night's Conservation Commission meeting, Robert DeGorsi was appointed as a full-time member of the Conservation Commission to replace Michael Chosnetsky, who was not reappointed. Please note that Michael Chasnowski's term expired on October 15th. Therefore, Robert DeCoursey will need to be formally appointed to the full 5-year term by the Board of Selectmen at our meeting. Also, Robert DeCoursey being appointed to a full-time position, there is now an alternate member vacancy on the Conservation Commission, with that term expiring October 15th, 2024. So I know Bill has been looking for a candidate to fill that role. If he could pick something, he would, I mean, it's open to anyone, obviously, but if he could pick someone, he'd love to have, there's never been a woman on that board. He'd like to ask for that. And there's also never been not recently hasn't been a Republican on that board. He'd like to have that. So just to round out the board a bit. And I told him that I would look for him and also keep our eyes open for someone that might want to be on the Conservation Commission. Okay.
So, Bob, did you say we have to appoint someone?
Yeah, we'll do it. We're gonna appoint, we're just gonna, tonight at the appointments, we'll make Robert DeGrossi, who's already an alternate member, into a full-time member.
Because I just, when you read, it is a little confusing that an appointed board, they're recruiting for their own board and sending it to, usually it just,
Well, he was
The
already
board,
on the
that's
board
fine.
as an alternate.
no, I mean, the rest of those statements from,
Oh, no, so I don't see what you're saying. So we're looking for someone they're gonna send someone to us that would say, I want to be on the commission. I send a copy to Antoinette. She sends a copy of that to either the RTC chair or the DTC chair. Then it comes back to us to appoint.
I think that Bill is saying that the board recommends filling the open full seat with somebody who's already an alternate.
gotcha, okay. Right, yep.
Oh, yeah,
just
we're doing the appointment. He's not appointing. So I think they voted that was the guy they were gonna send to us. That's it for that. Old business, demolition of the one-story 298 Norwich Westerly Road. It looks like it's going pretty well. As you can see, it got held up a little bit, but they're using that time to break up the concrete that's on the ground. Until we have a meeting tomorrow morning, as we normally do on Wednesdays, to find out more about what we're gonna do with that wall situation. And then as soon as I find that, I'll let you guys know what the plan is. Tax Relief Committee, we still have 3 possible appointees to that. And we're looking for 2 more. That's a minimum representation requirement. The 3 people who came out to ask for us for us to appoint, all Republicans. So we'd like to have 2 non-Republicans. I've asked, actually, some of the people that I've asked to be appointed, do you have any friends that are not Republican that could actually be on this board? So we're hoping to get 2 more names in so we can eventually appoint fairly soon. I was talking to Brian Rathron about it last night, actually, and he made a good point. He's one of the people that would like to be appointed. That going into the holiday season, since the 60-day clock doesn't start till they have their first meeting, that if we do appoint prior to the first of the year, let's not have their first meeting till after the first of the year to get through the holiday season, because they don't want to have only 60 days to work on something to present to the Board of Finance and be, between Christmas parties and Thanksgiving and so on. So that made sense.
And that makes sense because we would have, if something comes out of that, we would try to incorporate that for this budget season, and those numbers would have to be reflected in the budget, right?
Right. So if we could do something early January, they could report to the Board of Finance for early March. It's still within the budget.
Perfect.
So. Okay, and on the old business, last thing, but now we're on vacancies and appointments, so I would like to make a nomination. I motion that we appoint Robert DeGrossi, who is presently a alternate member to the Board, Conservation Commission, to a full-time membership.
I'll second that.
Okay, any other discussion? None? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. I'll send Joe an email, let him know that that's taken care of. Number 7, grant opportunity CDD resiliency program.
You had something else you wanted to talk about under vacancies and appointments with the
Oh, I
POC?
do. Thank you. It's in my notes right here, but I missed it. But I get you to help me. So at the last meeting of the steering committee for the POCD, we talked about hiring a consultant. And I think we spoke, as a board, we spoke about this before too. And you basically, you need someone that can consult to get you through the process. And with Nate taking the job in New Hampshire and Lou, speaking about stepping down and no longer being the chair of the Planning and Zoning Commission, and they are typically the committee that drives the POCD. We don't have a lot of expertise at the helm. With that said, I talked to the steering committee at our last meeting and said we should probably hire someone that knows about our past POCDs. And what I'd like to throw out there to you is a possibility of allowing me to contact Juliet Hodge, who pretty much wrote and developed the 2013 POCD, so who would know it better than her? We have to pay for a consultant anyway. Why not ask her if she would be willing to come back on a part-time basis and help us get through this process? My own self, I think it's a no-brainer. Nobody knows, again, more about it than the process. She did all the meetings and the community conversations, and she wrote the questions and put it together. And because it was such a good job done back in 2013, it's not like we have to start from scratch. But I think she would be someone I would like to say, yeah, would you be interested? But I wanted to get the approval of the Board of Selectmen first. If you say yes, go ahead, and I think that we agree, we go ask Juliet. I will give her a call tomorrow, see if she's open to the idea. If she is, then we'll have to talk about contracts. Now I'll come back to you and ask if it makes sense to hire her. Now, if we do that, we're gonna actually be in violation of our own policy, but we can, as a board, waive that policy. Because normally if you're hiring somebody, it has to go to an RFP. But
Not for professional services, though.
well, this doesn't fall under that.
It's not one of the listed. That's exempt.
And because of her institutional knowledge, I think there's no one out there that has equal institutional knowledge on our POC that she has. So my recommendation would be if you tell me that I can go and ask her tomorrow and she says, yes, she'd agree that she'd like to do it. We talk numbers. I bring those numbers back to you. I think that we should then divert from our regular policy of, going up to seek 3 bidders because of this, the specialty of this, and the fact it has to be done by December of 2023. And we have somebody that is close by that can work on, I would say that we would circumvent the policy and hire this person. Again, there's a process we have to take to get to that point. I don't know if she'd even be willing to do it and at what price. So that's where we are. And what I'd like to, again, just have a discussion from you tonight and let me know if you think it's a good idea. And I'd like to have a vote on it. Say yes, we can approach Juliet Hodge and ask her to be the consultant for the 2023 POCD.
Are you looking things up?
I'm just looking up, the statutes on the
Yeah,
professional
I mean, I
services, but-
think I personally, Juliet is so knowledgeable and still very passionate about North Stonington. I don't think that I have any kind of concern about having her in that role. I think I would probably feel a little bit better knowing that we weren't circumventing our own policy. So I don't know what that would entail if we clearly, if we don't.
I think I heard, you can tell me if I'm wrong, Christine, that with 2/3 vote, we can vote to move away from the policy on a particular item. We need
Yeah.
2/3 vote to pass anything because we only have 3 people, so 2 people would have to pass it anyway. And it's our policy. There was no policy, there's no ordinance or statute in town. It's a policy that we just actually passed about 2 meetings ago.
Yeah.
But I understand your concern.
And I'll look up more on that because I thought when they listed those professional services, those were examples of professional services. I didn't think it was limited to those, but I could be wrong, but I'll take a look. But regarding Juliet, I was on EDC when the last POC was done. And there was a lot involved. So I can't imagine us doing it without someone with knowledge of both the town and that process. So even though we had consultants back then, it was still steered by Juliet. She still was the one that made sure Economic Development Commission had some of their stuff done, housing had their stuff done. And even though you had an outside consultant, she was the one steering that ship to be able to get the information and then compile it. So it makes sense if she'd be interested and we can find out that we can do it that way, that she be that one, especially with all the transition, to make sure it's done and it's done right. And I think if this were to work, it would be done more cost effective than us just putting out separate bids for each part of it.
I'll be honest with you, I was not in favor of this. Before Nate gave his notice that he was gonna be leaving, because I thought Nate was the town planner. I thought he should have every chance to take this on and have it be his plan. And I thought at that time, hiring someone that has much knowledge as Juliet would then could maybe suffocate him a little bit in his role. But now with it, with him leaving and having Lou stepping down as the chair of the Planning and Zoning Commission, I think that lack of leadership at the top, leaves a big void for us. And I think the only one I know that can fill that void is Juliet.
Yeah.
One other comment, just based on, and I know I've heard it said before that, you wanted it, or people wanted it not Juliet's plan, or they'd rather Nate's plan, but it's really neither of them. It's the town's plan. Because as we know, through the years of being in office and helping out, those roles change. People come, people leave, especially when they're staff. They can come and leave at a drop of a hat. So that's why we compile all that information from the residents, because it's the town's plan. They might put it together, but it's not the planner's plan. It's the town and the residents of where they want the town to go. So.
No, I understand. I don't totally disagree, but as you just said, Juliet's role in the first time in 2013 was such a large role. And we were paying at the time a planner, and this is part of his job description. So I wanted to give him every opportunity to do what we were paying him for. But that all has changed now with the landscape being changed. I think makes sense to me that to go back and ask the person who's probably most capable of putting this together for us in a short period of time. And we have basically a year to get this done. So, and a lot of towns start this 2 years before the process.
And if you look at the 2013 plan, they started meeting in the beginning of end of 2012, beginning of 2013 is when they had a lot of their fact-finding questions. So we do have to get moving on this in the beginning of the year to get that information, because I think it was adopted in like November or December of 2013. But a lot of that fact-finding was happening starting April, March timeframe.
So if we did go by the policy and we put it out for bid, what's the shortest amount of time that we can put it out?
2 weeks. But so let's say we put it out, and let's say we get someone that can come in, just to throw a number, $10,000 less money than the second place finisher and whoever that is, and say Juliet's not the lowest. I think you're just giving up a lot. And how do you put a price tag on that?
But I
consultant?
thought that our policy says that we don't have to take the lowest bid.
We don't.
We can take the one that fits the request the most.
So if we're
Best.
if we're doing that, then aren't we doing a disservice to the other bidders, knowing that unless something crazy happens, we're gonna hire this
So
person?
I do understand that point. I do. If we have it in our minds that the most qualified person for the project is Juliet, based on all of her background and historical knowledge, I do understand how it doesn't seem fair to have engage other people. I just, again, want to make sure that it's within our power. I just doesn't feel good, and I'm just concerned about the optics of voting to stray from our own policy.
So I would think we actually fall under our policy. So our policy says exemptions, professional services such as, but not limited to lawyers, architects, engineers are exempt from this procedure.
If you didn't have Juliet in mind, we would be moving forward with an RFQ. That's why any other situation we would be doing it. So that's why you would need to suspend the policy, but it is completely within your own policy to suspend the policy
Okay.
in specific circumstances, as long as you're all,
Yeah.
well, 2/3 of you are in favor of
Okay.
it. So
Yeah.
I would say if you're leaning towards working with Juliet, it is in the best interest of anyone who would be putting in the time to submit a proposal for the RFQ to not do the RFQ and. move
Right.
forward.
Okay,
I,
And-
I would disagree with that, but that's, it doesn't matter. We can vote on it anyways.
what,
Because I'm reading it as it's written.
so
I did too.
if we
Where the
reach
voting-
out to Juliet, so say we vote and we get 2/3 and we reach out to her and the answer is no, I just can't take that on.
Then we have
Then-
to do an RFP.
Okay,
We have to hire a consultant.
Yeah.
Somebody has to do it because there's no one right now that presently in town that can handle this.
Yeah. okay.
And Nicole, just so you, it was when we started putting money aside for this, it was budgeted when not Christine, when Juliet was here, because she was actually taking on a large part of the role that we did sub out before. So I feel like even if we had to hire, if we have a planner by then and we have to hire it out, I don't think we funded it quite as much as we would need to, because Juliet was going to do a lot of that work in-house.
There's 3 components that are gonna go into it. It's the data, which we're still going to have to purchase, the mapping, which we still are going to have to purchase, and then putting everything together and having someone come in and run the meetings, which would be what you would want Juliet or another consultant to do.
So do we want to vote on this tonight?
I'd like to take a vote just so I have direction from the board that we voted to say, yes, you can ask Juliet, approach her to see if she'd be willing to do this. If she does, there's gonna be another vote because we're gonna have to talk about a contract. I have to bring that back to you. And then that's when we would circumvent the policy. All you're doing right now is asking me to find out if she'd even be willing to do it. When if she says yes, I bring that back to you. Then as a board, we have to decide, do we want to hire her at this price?
Okay,
And that's where we're actually circumventing, but it's not happening tonight.
okay. So I will make a motion to give you, Bob, approval to move forward and have a conversation with Juliet Hodge to see if she would be interested in serving as our POCD consultant.
Second that?
Okay, so Nicole's made the motion, Brett has second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I will get a hold of Juliet tomorrow. And once I have an answer, I will text you both or email you both. Don't reply. I'll just send you a message that, yes, she wants to work with us or not. And then I'll set up a meeting with myself and her and maybe Christine just to say, what are we looking at for dollars and cents to get this
Okay.
done? Okay? And that'll come back to the Board of Selectmen. Thank you. Okay, number 7, grant opportunity for CDD resiliency program. So we have a guest tonight. Beth is here to speak on this. She spoke to me a little bit with Christina in the office. And I gave you a handout. That what you sent me, I sent to both of them, so they have that. Thank you for being here, by the way. And if,
Bob,
Push it one.
sorry, I was looking at Brett and said Bob instead.
Thanks, Brett. You don't want extra feedback on your
We should put those
recording?
Stickers on.
Yeah, there's a little cheat sheet
Yeah.
right here. Click it
oh, we
once.
have Brett to do that.
Thank you all for having me here tonight. As Bob mentioned, Beth Kermsey, I'm both a resident of the town and tonight I'm representing Fussin O'Neill, which is a consulting and landscape architecture, engineering, transportation engineering firm. I'm out of the Providence office. We also have offices in Connecticut, Massachusetts, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine. And I'm here because I joined Fussin O'Neill last year after being involved with managing them for a couple of years on different contracts while I was at Gilbane. But when I came to work for them, it was brought to my attention that they had completed a 2017 study. In 2017, they completed a study of the Wood Pawcatuck River watershed. And that this study involves 18 municipalities, all of which have a watershed that drains out via the Pawcatuck. And we have the honor of being the only municipality, well, there's a tiny bit of Pawcatuck that drains into it, but really, as a whole, we fall over the border. So we represent Connecticut's side of this watershed. And so, as you can imagine, since resilience funding comes down through the state organizations, this watershed has seen a lot of improvement on the Rhode Island side, but there really, since 2017, hasn't been a lot of movement on this watershed from the Connecticut side until CT Deep announced their resilience fund. They started with a straw proposal last spring, and then developed it into a full proposal this fall. And so I would like to propose that that we write a grant application on behalf of the town of North Stonington to focus on both the Assaconk Brook and the Chinook river watersheds, which would essentially cover the portion of the Wood Pawcatuck watershed on the eastern part of North Stonington. In that 2017 study, which is the handout that Bob circulated to you, you can see that in that study, they identified a number of culverts, bridges, and dams that are more or less choke points along this, particularly the Chinook. The Assaconk is a little bit different because it's more of a capacity situation and an overflow of capacity. But along the Chinook, it's pinch points. And so with this study, what we would propose to do is to assess the watershed, assess these pinch points, look at possibilities for mitigating flood hazards up through the Chinook and around the Assaconk. What does that mean for the town, in terms beyond just controlling flow on a river and controlling organism movement through a riverine corridor? For our town right now, we have two major political or items on our political agenda. One being the tear down of the rest of the building that we're in, and what to do and how to reconfigure that parcel of land. So in the 2017 study, that parcel of land was identified as a key location for potential green infrastructure. The parcel 185 is connected across the street to, I think it's 184, to parcel 184 to the north, which then contains portions of which is also owned by the same Wheeler Library, Wheeler School. It shares a similar title. So, and it also has a large encroachment from the 100-year floodplain. Now, of course, the 100-year floodplain that's mapped does not take into consideration effects of climate change, increased storm frequency. And so that type of modeling is something that could be taken into account via this study. If we were to apply to the CT Deep Resilience Fund, we could apply for enhanced modeling to look at our more current risks to flooding, which are above and beyond those that we experienced in 2010. And additionally, that's one area that I think that we could address as a deliverable out of this study. We would be able to get a framework for how to manage flood resilience with these properties. And so if I may use an example for a project that I'm currently managing for the town of Westerly and the Southern Rhode Island Conservation District, which is developing a project from a similar point of view. In Rhode Island, in Westerly, on the Main Street corridor, that corridor is highly prone to flooding. So we went to RIDOT, and RIDOT has monies associated with planning green infrastructure. Now, green infrastructure is your typical BMP, and I might be just speaking in jargon, so I apologize. So it's Thank you for making me laugh, Brad.
No problem.
Okay, so let me just step out of the engineering world and into reality. So in Westerly, what we're planning on doing on Main Street, what we're proposing on Main Street is installing buffer strips that would be planted with plants that are meant to attenuate stormwater, but also are chosen specifically to provide enhanced water quality. So they're plants that can live on the side of a road, accept salt tolerant, have a high tolerance to salt, but also in the process of the water entering those systems and being processed by the plants, the water is quality is improved. So we took, okay, we're going to line the street with this system, which is a planted system. So then we've said, well, we're going to do this in a way that enhances the green corridor, your experience. What's your pedestrian experience, your vehicular experience through that corridor? So we used that stormwater to bridge into funding sources for Renaissance. So now what we're looking at is using all of that planting that's going to function as stormwater treatment as a way of creating a welcome to Westerly corridor that we're looking at economic benefits. So we started with that nugget of stormwater and used it to step up to that. And then we're taking this enhanced corridor to also say, what if we bury the lines? So the project leverages into resilience issues and then becomes applicable for funding for from resilience funding that will look at burying the lines. And then if we're burying the lines and we're looking at resilience, so we have to do a model to do that. Well, what if we use that model to attract funding to develop a waterfront that would allow people to get access to the waterfront? So it's a comprehensive reimagination of what is happening in Westerly's Main Street that started with the nugget of stormwater management. So if you can just see how that piece of the planning puzzle was the first step towards a much larger picture, that is essentially what I can envision for North Stonington. If we were to undertake the Chinook River watershed study via this, which by the way is a no match funding source from CT Deep. The whole point of the CT Deep program is to develop projects at the state that will be well positioned for federal implementation dollars. So if we were to take this study and look at stormwater and look at how we would deal with flooding in Main Street, in the village, flooding that affects Route 2. One of the major pinch points identified in the 2017 study is the underpass just to the east of where we are sitting right now. And so that's a vulnerable section of a major state road. If we were to take those, we could leverage that further. And by leveraging that further, use that as the backbone to attract more dollars that will help us rethink this parcel in particular. So as a strategy for attracting money towards our village center and towards it's basically killing a couple birds, same stone. And similarly, we would be able to look at issues of flooding in Kingswood on Ravenwood out of the Asconk Swamp, out of this watershed study. I'm happy to answer any questions. I know it's a long road to get to where we want to be, but it's no match state funding to start the conversation that will lead to, I think, an eventual vision for our property here that will give us flood protection, which our town would certainly benefit from, especially, knowing what we suffered in the 2010 flood. And also to help build that backbone to bring this to the next level.
Good, thank you. Questions?
Just a few.
Hammer away, Brett.
Just a few. So the Westerly project, is that through Rhode Island DOT that you're working with, or you're working
Oh,
for
it-
Westerly?
So we, that Westerly project has funding. It started with RIDOT. We had a grant from the Narragansett Bay Estuary Program, the Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank, where I'm being recorded, but there's a press release coming up.
Okay,
So there's additional federal funding.
so there is federal funding that is going.
Yeah, we have
to that.
attracted federal funding and we have two more federal funding applications in the works, which we're very hopeful. They seem promising.
So this initial bill that we're looking at here, a proposal, this is just for you to write our grant.
This is to write the application to the, right,
grant
exactly, the grant application.
Okay. And is there, do you know of how many municipalities go after this?
This
This
is their
grant?
first offering.
Okay, so there's
so
no history.
There's no history. So I was speaking with David Murphy earlier today. He is aware of, so there's a track 1 and a track 2. He is aware of 30 applications for both tracks. And we surmise that there's probably, about 50 out there.
And is it competitive
So
process?
yeah, everything will be ranked. So 40% of the funding has to go to environmental justice communities. Well, only 40% has to go to environmental justice communities. So the rest of it is available. And
And then in your experience, when you see that, say we get the planning grant, you're awarded it. What, I know it's hard to say, but what's the likelihood that we actually move forward and get funding to implement some of these projects? Is
so
it super competitive where it's very difficult, or do you see a lot of smaller communities getting funding through the state or federal?
so I have heard on the webinars with CTD that they are really looking to use this program by saying that there's no match, and also by offering, it is a reimbursable program, but they are offering creative ways to bridge that for the same way. So in Rhode Island, the Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank will make a loan to the municipality to cover the costs at a very low rate. It's 1.5%. And then that allows the smaller municipalities to move ahead with these grant funds without having to foot the bill. And it's working out fantastically. I know that, so Rebecca French, who is in charge of this program at CTD, is works very closely with Sean O'Rourke, who runs the Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank. And there is an intent to use the Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank model to a certain extent in the application of this rollout. This rollout is that Connecticut is working on is something that has been modeled in Massachusetts under their MVP, their municipal vulnerability plan. And also under the MRP, the Municipal Resilience Plan in Rhode Island. And the Nature Conservancy, ironically based in New Haven, has helped Massachusetts and Rhode Island advance this model of developing projects and getting them ready for federal funding. And so Connecticut has the benefit of looking to those examples. So we can say, okay, well, this is where Massachusetts had some lessons learned. So we can adopt those,
All right.
which
And then my
is a
last,
nice place to be.
it is, it sounds great. My last question is, so do you foresee this $7,000 expenditure to be the total for the application process? Because it does say that this budget will not exceed without expressed authorization. So I'm just,
It's a good
it
question.
leaves it in there for, hey, yeah, we thought we'd get it done, but we're not quite there yet.
So I'll full disclosure, as a resident in North Stonington, I've pushed for this to be a break even because I feel that it's something that will put North Stonington on the map. And as someone who is trying to develop this type of project in Connecticut, we've done a ton of work. Not so, okay. My office specializes in this in Rhode Island. And we'd like to bring what we've learned to Connecticut. And as a resident, I would love to do that for North Stonington. So yeah, I don't think it'll exceed.
Okay.
I
thank
mean,
you.
you might drive past my house, might be working at midnight. But
Yeah,
won't go
I
there
know
for
where you
that.
live. I appreciate it answering my questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Nicole?
Okay, you need to kind of bear with me a little bit more as I learn. So I'm going to talk out loud to make sure that I'm understanding. So you're asking for $7,000 to write the grant application, to apply for money, to assist us in the beginning projects of something that could very well be, leading to other, bigger and better projects. There's no guarantee, though, that we would get the money awarded to us, correct?
No, there's no guarantee.
Okay. And what I think I'm understanding you telling Brett is that there's a system by which we do not have to put the money up front, and then be reimbursed for the money that we use for the project. So I'm just concerned about the total, let's say we give you the $7,000 and you write it and we get the grant. How do we know upfront how much the project is going to end up costing and how much we're going to get from the grant?
Sure. So that's during the project scoping phase. What we would do is outline the project with you. We'd have a meeting to discuss all the possibilities, because when you apply for this grant, they're expecting applications, or the window of applications that they've said that they're anticipating are $100,000 to $300,000 studies. They will certainly look at and evaluate studies that request less, and they'll evaluate studies that request more, but I don't think that this project would warrant anything more than that. But I mean, in a study, in the build, that's a different story. But we can look at, we can do a study that evaluates each of the points and makes suggestions for improvements. We could look at a study that provides specific modeling, so watershed modeling here, which gives us like a revised, basically it would give you a revised FIRM or a FEMA map, a revised FEMA map showing your flood levels. Is one deliverable of it, but the engineers would use that to size the new design of any new culvert, new bridge, or to look at the hydrodynamics that result from removing a dam, should that be part of it. So when you add the modeling in, modeling is something that CT Deep said could fall under track 1 or track 2. So it could show up on either side of the equation. So we would go through that process to see what the town is comfortable with as far as the scope of a study and how far you would want to get. You know, what is the goal? Do we want to go after federal culvert funding this spring? That's a goal that we could get you to, but it would require asking for more in order to get there. Or do you ask for enough to get us through a track 1, which would make us eligible for a track 2 next year? And the track 2, then we would ask for the modeling in that, and then go for federal funding, either BRIC, HMGP. So BRIC is the FEMA grant that is the largest catch-all for this type of work. HMGP is a hazard mitigation grant, and the FEMA, the local FEMA group issues those, and they tend to be, well, not BRIC, but the HMGPs are storm related. So for example, the HMGP that we're applying for in Westerly, to look at the wires, has a 10% match on it. But the brick, which is direct to FEMA, has a 25% match on it. So it depends on what the goals are, and what our timeline is for implementation on the different culvert repairs, culvert upgrades, bridge repairs, bridge upgrades, to be more flood resilient. Not to mention what we would do with green infrastructure in on the parcel that's being vacated by the demolition of this building. And then the green infrastructure funding tends to be, there have been allocations at the state level for green infrastructure as well. So it would position us for that. But when we would scope this project, we would want to identify very specific goals and timelines for different aspects of it. And then we could shape our grant request to meet those goals.
Anything else, Nicole?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay, and some other questions lead to more questions. So basically, to me, it sounds like this is the first step of what could be a wonderful journey, wonderful trip. However, if you don't take the first step, you're not going on the trip. Secondly, seems like there's a lot of layers of funding, asking for funding. We know the first layer is a no match layer, but we're not sure down the road there could be matches. We just did a steep grant, was just 20% match. So it's not a zero match all the way through from start to finish.
That's correct. It's not a zero match, but you have this study from 2017. If you did a study now and it's completed in 2023, then you have you're building a solid record on this. And so when the town is ready, you have all of this build up to it that you can point to. So there is the value in just having the study so that you're ready later on when the town is ready to commit. Or, so I hate to say it, but when there are major storms, there are usually new allocations, and the towns that have plans ready are ready to go after those allocations when they're launched. And when they're launched, they usually have the lowest match.
Mhm. Okay, so all this 7,000 is because it's track one, is to get zero match funding to have, then it would be Fuss and O'Neill again coming up with the bigger plan, which the town's not paying for. So this is similar to what we did with the 1750 house, with the is it Shepo? Yeah, so we spent $20,000 to get that done, and there was a 50% match, I think, wasn't it? Was it 100%? Fully funded. So we had we paid, we had the grant to get the work done on the 1750 house to determine where we wanted to go with it. And because that particular group does everything in an historical fashion, that as we went through this, that would make that house like it was in 1770. It was very expensive. It was a $400,000 bill, which became a 50% match. So the town would come up with 200,000, and then they would give us 200,000 to get that house to where they wanted it to be. We didn't know that until we went through the whole grant process. And then we decided as a town not to do that, not to spend $400,000 because we didn't feel the need to get that house to that. We weren't going to make it into a museum. We're hoping to have it lived in as we do now. And then maybe somewhere down the road, do something with arts and culture in it. And that, again, that's down the road, but we didn't feel we wanted to go to the extreme that they recommended. I guess it's the same thing with this, Beth, is we come up with a plan, but then there's going to be a point where the towns have to decide, do we want to invest in getting it to that level? Or do we want to get somewhere in between where we are now and that level, correct?
Correct.
All right, so what kind of numbers do you think you're looking at for that for that next plan?
I know when we talked about a $30,000 plan as being something that might be comfortable. And that would get you further than you are today. Absolutely. I think that your best value, particularly since this is a zero match funding source. I think that if you asked for somewhere between 70 and 100, it would get you so much further. But particularly, thinking through resilience funding is flowing right now. Watershed funding is flowing. And with climate change, if it continues on this trajectory and storm activity continues on this trajectory, well, I guess what I'm saying is there's money now and there's money planned to be in the immediate future, and going after it. I think it puts you in a better position to take advantage of some of the funding sources on the horizon. It certainly 30,000 would put us on the map and would give us something that we can point to make us eligible for future funding sources, especially if the 2010 flood happens again, and we will have a study ready to go that will put us into a better position as far as eligibility. And I shouldn't say if it happens again. If you look at all of the modeling, it will happen again. And when it does, and there's FEMA funding available, we want to be ready to take advantage of that. In the meantime, if the town feels that or if a funding source comes up that is attractive to the town, or if it becomes a item that the town wants to push forward on, we would be in a position to push forward on that as well.
I have other questions, but you look like you want to ask a question.
No,
Dave.
you go ahead.
Okay.
No, finish.
So we know this is going to be very competitive. How many total dollars are out there to be had by these 30 or 50 towns that are going to be vying for this money? Do we know how many dollars are available?
We do. We don't know how they're going to split it up between the two. So it's in the neighborhood of, I believe it was 28 million.
28 million? Okay. And did you say that 40% of towns, distressed towns, or what was that comment about?
So 40% of the funding has to go to EJ communities, environmental justice communities. And
What does that mean exactly?
so there is an actual rating for environmental justice communities in Connecticut, but that rating is not going to apply to this funding source. So for example, you could say, there's environmental justice communities that are served by Route 2. We want to make Route 2 more resilient so that this road is passable, so that during a flood event, the people from environmental justice communities like Norwich, which is identified, Griswold, which is identified.
It's crazy. All the Volun towns identified. A lot of
Pawcatuck.
towns around us.
Yeah, we're an island.
Was that,
but-
but that's not the same as distressed community, correct?
It's not, yeah.
So what is the definition of an environmental justice community?
It's very open in this. So do you have a food desert, which is an area that isn't served by a grocery store? North Stonington is a food desert. Do you have what's the level of college education? What's the access to vehicles? That your census block, you can point to your census block.
And what you're saying is that 40% of that 28 million needs to go towards environmental justice communities.
Correct.
So we would be dealing and competing for the other 60% is what you're saying.
If we didn't go after it, yes, we would have to be, we would really have to be competitive in that 60%. But because of our position and because we're looking at flooding on Route 2, I think that we have an argument to make that we are a major corridor that links known environmental justice communities, and that as such, these people are passing through North Stonington, or they might work here, or they go through here to get to work. And the application is, they are open to to creative linking and definitions. They have deliberately not tied themselves to the Connecticut official designation.
The fact that we were just classified recently as just fell into the distressed community plateau, believe it or not. We were before, we weren't.
Mhm.
And I just got a letter last week, Christine, right, that said that we were now in the bottom 25 of the 169 cities and towns as far as income, college graduation, level of learning and so on. And I called and said, I disagree with this. This can't be right. And they said, well, it goes off the 2020 census. So even though we've had this big influx in the last 2 years of people moving in, seems like there's more dollars, which I think is, it's a negative that we're on this list, but it could be a positive in this particular case, because even though I don't agree that we're on it, I don't believe should be on it.
It,
We can use it to our advantage possibly.
it actually looks like part of our town is in the environmental justice community. According to this map, like the Clark's, it shows
The
the
Clark's
Clark's Falls
Falls.
area, yeah.
So that's outside of the proposed study area.
Okay,
But it's not that that area doesn't have flood mitigation issues. That area was identified as having flood mitigation issues, and we could talk through some of the scoping. It might be strategic to go after the portion of our town that falls underneath the flood mitigation issues where we do have EJ, to make it a more competitive. It just expands the scope a bit and diverts attention away from the village and maybe using this as a framework but that's only one strategy. So during our scoping meeting, we could discuss that.
And if we move forward with this, I do want to give you a copy of that letter from the state that you could use, because it's, again, we use it to our advantage, even though I don't
Sounds
like
key.
being in there.
Really sounds.
The last thing for me is your scheduling. So the way we have to do things in town is when we're looking to ask for money, it has to come, if it's an appropriation, it has to come from the Board of Finance, or even if it's a line item transfer of funds. So their next meeting isn't until November 2nd. So it's, we could get it on that meeting, but I see your schedule's pretty aggressive because I think the funding application time ends on the 10th.
It does. So they did not announce this program until the end of September. And the window that they gave for applications is very small.
they could always have a special meeting or something if
Yeah.
we choose to move forward for that.
So do we have ARPA? Do we have
I
ARPA
was gonna
funds
suggest
left?
that too.
And would we still need to go to the Board of Finance for just a $7,000 ask of ARPA funds?
We would go to the Board of Finance on all ask.
Okay.
We just still go to a town meeting if it's 20,000 or
Okay.
more.
And I'm gonna apologize because I just, again, need to talk something through. 7,000 for the grant application. The grant application is for monies for the study of what needs to be done, could be done. And then after that, we would have to apply for federal grants to actually complete the project.
Right. For implementation.
Okay, I just want to talk that
And
through.
so depending on how much you want to go for in the track one, you could put forth an ask in track one that would get you all the way through construction drawings. But my advice would be to say in track one that you wanted to get 30% to 50% of the design done. And then you would go for either a track two from the state in the next round, or go for so next year, or go for an advanced assistance from HMGP or BRIC. And the advanced assistance would close the gap on the design, and then you would go to them for implementation.
Okay, and
so-
then, so each time we're applying for additional grants to move the project forward, is that something that you're suggesting either you or your company do? Is that something that our own town grant writer would do? So the original $7,000 ask for the grant for the study may not be the end, we would need to have additional grants written and applied for.
Correct.
Okay,
There would be at least one more for implementation, if not two.
okay,
And some municipalities choose to chunk it out over 3 or 4 grants, depending on that appetite for it and the political will. It all depends on how fast the town wants to move it forward. And what funding's available.
Okay. As far as the ARPA funding, if we could use that.
Yeah.
It make it a little bit more appealing to the Board of Finance rather than appropriation or the
Right.
designated funds, I'm sure. To see if we can get them to have a special meeting between now and November 2nd. I could talk to their chairman and see if he could pull something together. It would be a short meeting because this would be the only topic on it probably. Beth, I might, if that happens, I might need you to come back and speak again because
Happy to.
the knowledge that you have, we can't translate that to the Board of Finance. I'm sure we can't. Oh, I know I can't.
I can barely take notes on it, but,
Christine, did you
I-
have a comment? Oh, sorry.
yeah, I just had a,
Okay.
well, I guess they're more statements than questions, I guess. So when I went to the annual sector meeting last, or the beginning of the year, might have been the end of last year, they all run together, but they talked about how much federal funding's flowing for all these different types of projects. And their big takeaway was you have to be prepared. So it's good to use certain dollars and certain federal dollars or state dollars to be prepared for another grant. You can't overlap certain things, but you can use one to start the planning and then another one to finish it, and you fall within the rules. But a lot of it says you have to be prepared. You have to have those certain studies ready to go. I can tell you after my initial opinion from reading through it compared to hearing it, my opinions changed on it, and I would be supportive of moving this forward. And I think ARPA funding is perfect for a project like this. When I look at some of the other things we gave ARPA funding to, so I'm glad you brought it up. I was going to mention as well that, it talks about certain infrastructure programs and resiliency, and this kind of ties into all that. And if we know, knock on wood, that we are going to be a little shorter than the dollars expected for the tear down, there are still monies in there that aren't expended that we thought we might have to expend. So I would be a proponent of moving this forward and to the Board of Finance and then going from there, because like you said, the first step is 100% funding if we get that grant to do the planning. So for $7,000, we're getting a full plan, hopefully.
If I was able to pull up a Board of Finance meeting next week, which would put us in the last week of the month, correct? So move it up a week closer to where the November 2nd date is. How would that work for you? 'Cause I don't think I can pull one together between now and
Bob, November 2nd is next Wednesday.
it is.
It is.
Yeah. They
Halloween
could do it.
Friday.
Might see if they could just do all Zoom meeting and be on.
I know I wouldn't be
Online.
available tomorrow evening. I don't know if they could do one on Thursday
But Thursday would be the earliest we could do it legally.
legally.
It all depends on, so there's a couple of key items that I need from the town in order to write the application. And so we can collapse the schedule as long as we can collapse those things, which that like the census data, the EJ data, the type of information that you have in-house, which I could probably tease out, but that it would be so much easier to, if you wouldn't mind assisting to get that stuff together. So we would have to have our scoping meeting immediately after. So it would be like an hour to 2 hour block next week. But if we could hammer out the scoping that we want to go after, then really I just need that last week to write it. But next week I would need to pull together the letter of commitment from the town, letters of support from we'd need to reach out to like Avalonia, and we'd need to reach out to, if we could get something from CT DOT, that would be great. They're not necessary, but they're good. The COG, which would be ready to, I would believe, give you that, since with the hazard mitigation plan that they just put together, which is almost published. It'll be published after this date, but we're allowed to reference the items that are in it in this application. So we'd go to the COG, the letters of commitment, letters of support, and any kind of data, you know, that we have.
So would
That's all-
that fall on Christine, a lot of the?
Well, a lot of that's spelled
Did
out in here.
they-
I can ask for the letters from different organizations, but as far as the census, I don't imagine we have that in.
No one has the 2020 data. Not done.
Right. So we'd just be going off was it 2013?
It'd be 2010,
Okay.
but yeah, I
well-
don't think 2020 data hasn't been released yet, correct?
No.
Yeah.
But as far as the letters, I can work on those. We can get other things, information from town. So do you think that if they met at their regular time on the 2nd, which is next Wednesday, it would be too late to pull everything together? If we start pulling it together prior to that?
Can I take up your time on the 3rd and the 4th?
You could.
Okay.
And you might be
Yeah.
working pro bono if it doesn't go through. on those
I
three.
can't imagine that the Board of Finance, when you give a tremendous presentation to them, I think they would, I think the same thing what Brett said, you know, it's confusing, right, Nicole? You don't, it's not an easy topic to grasp. I don't know a lot about it. I didn't go to school
It's-
for this. And I think it's a confusing topic, and it's fairly new because I don't think I even knew what stormwater was, unless you told me it's the water that comes after a storm. I don't know what that is, but. So, but there's so many pots to it. It's confusing to those of us that don't have background in it. And I think that, as Brett said, by reading it's one thing, but to hear about it and understand what the scope of this is for the future of the town. So many people were hurt during the 2010 floods. Businesses were hurt, homes were hurt. I mean, you couldn't get a dumpster. Everybody had dumpsters in their front yard from their basements, right? So the amount of money that was lost and destroyed, and I think because all the things we love about this town, which is open space and rivers and streams, and those are things that can come back and hurt us when these things happen. So, yeah, if we can talk again, but if I can get that on the agenda for the 2nd, and I don't mind getting some quality time with you on the 3rd and the 4th, especially if we'll get the approval on the 2nd, we're moving
Right. We
forward.
will know if we can
And
move it
then,
up.
I can give you pretty much as much time as you need on the 3rd and 4th.
Bob,
Yeah.
I think it's worth asking if they can do a special on Thursday.
Of this Thursday? So that we-
Because it gives extra time. Yes.
Now,
we're already
technic-
short-staffed. at the town hall.
Technically, they could do an emergency meeting. They did do based on the need of a deadline, but I'd hate to have to go there, but that is an option. But I would think if it was proposed to them to try to do a Zoom meeting, not try to meet in person, because that's gonna be difficult. They do it any day of the time, well, 24 hours from when they call it to get this done. And I do think it would be helpful if it is on ARPA. I think that would help that process compared to after the undesignated fund requests that we've had recently. I think it would, first of all, it ties into what we're looking to do, and it'd be easier or more palatable for them. And like you said, Bob, it's important to stress to them that the last time we were in there was financial concern in the town was after that flooding and bridges out and things like that. So it kind of makes sense for the short dollars to at least, worst case, have the plan there. Best case, we can actually do stuff and get full money.
Well, so many of these fundings rely on shovel-ready projects.
Yeah.
And those people that haven't even started yet are way behind the curve. So if we're ahead of the curve, we'd be more apt to realize the benefits. So
I
Uh,
agree with Christine. I think it's worth asking
I can
Board of
ask Paul
Finance if
tomorrow
they can
morning.
meet on Thursday. Does that meet all the requirements as far as having a meeting, posting it?
Yes,
If it's all,
since it's not a regularly scheduled meeting, they don't have to have the 48, to do an online meeting, they don't have to have the 48 hours advance notice. It's since it's a special meeting, it's just the 24 hour.
And the meeting probably wouldn't take more than a half hour, 45 minutes, right? Because it'd be a short presentation and discussion and a vote, so.
Yeah, I would push for 7 o'clock on Thursday night to be the time.
7 o'clock on Thursday would be a good time. Would you need to be there to be the
I
facilitator?
I would be there online, but I will be home from my appointment by that time, so.
Okay,
But if they can't, you don't technically have to be present.
well, who's
I'm
gonna
the
run
one
the
that
Zoom
starts the
meeting?
Oh, that's right. You start this.
Oh.
I think one of those members could learn to do it, but you're right. Better to have you there.
All right,
Um,
so we'll ask them to meet for a Zoom on Thursday at 7.
So I'll make a motion to move this proposal forward using ARPA funding and send it over to the Board of Finance
Okay,
for $7,000.
I'll second that.
okay, so we have a motion on the
Can
floor.
I
and it's
ask
been
my
s-
question?
excuse me?
Oh,
I
I
ask my
thought you did.
question?
I'm sorry.
So with the deliverables that we would get from you for this application, if we were awarded the grant, would we be able to use those documents to then put an RFP out to get whoever's gonna actually do the plan? I know that you would be bidding on that, but since it's state funds, we would have to follow all those competitive processes. So would we have enough in hand that we could then put out the RFP or RFQ to do the work?
Yes.
Because I know we can't write that. We don't have the technical. That was my question. Thank you.
Okay, so any other discussion? Let's vote. All in favor of moving the $7,000 to the Board of Finance, the money coming out of ARPA funding, for them to make a decision on it, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Perfect. I'll give Paul a call first thing in the morning. I'll give Juliet a call first thing in the morning.
You got a
See-
to-do list, that's for
Yeah.
sure.
See who else I'll be calling first thing in the morning, but Beth, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you guys
Thank you
very
very
much.
much.
Really
Um,
appreciate the
Sorry if I had
opportunity.
to have you dumb it down for me a little bit, but
Not
unfortunately.
at all.
Okay.
You know, this is a very complex, the reason I gave the example of Westerly is because it's very complex to think about how looking at stormwater would result in anything beyond, a fish making its way up the Chinook, but it has so many ramifications to, personal property, town property, and our lives here in North Stonington that I'm happy to explain.
And I think most people that were here in 2010, which was a lot of us, it's not like it's, distant history. It's recent history. And we know what, as Brett said, we know what it did to the undesignated fund. We didn't have money to replace the bridge for 3 years. We had to wait for FEMA money to come in. A lot of people personally were hurt severely by it. Businesses were put out of business. So, yeah, I think now's the time to probably get ahead of the curve on this. And thank you for your assistance. All
Thank
right.
you.
Thanks.
Don't feel the need you have to sit through the rest of the meeting either. We have to, but you don't have to. Okay, number 8, NSVFC carryover, North Stonington Volunteer Fire Company. Last year, the Volunteer Fire Company asked us, they had some money left over. They asked us if they could keep it and use it toward their per diem. There was some extra equipment they wanted to buy and so on. They have a small amount of money left over from last year. And it was $4,490.12. And they're asking us again if they could use that. Now, you should have the letter in your packet. And since it's a request, we thought we'd bring it to the Board of Selectmen to have a decision made.
Bob, the chief is on, if you want to.
Chief Steinhart's on them. I can't see that far, I think. Chief, did you want to comment on this request?
Sure. So the carryover request is not for anything other than remaining in the per diem line. The previous request was remaining funds of 57, 59, 33 of the previous year. This year's request is the 44, 90, 12. So basically it remains in the line. It gives us the ability to have additional funding for storm coverage. No snowstorms, hurricanes, whatever happens throughout the year that are unknowns. You'll see we did submit an annual report. With we're $1,269 over budget in that line, but by remaining able to retain the extra money from last year, it makes sure we don't go over the budget that's budgeted. So there's always a little bit of money left in the account, around $4,000 each year, that we're moving forward to ensure we always have the funds available to have storm coverage and stuff like that.
So Chief, that money wasn't from hours not work left over from last year.
No, that money was from, like, you look at it, that this money is for hours worked. It also pays for uniforms, gear, and training. All that stuff rolls into this account.
Okay, thank you. So I just have a question for maybe Christine. Do we have any kind of policy that in the past that had to come back? Or is it just usual and customary that money?
So, it's customary that the fire company gives back anything that wasn't spent from their, allocation, since it's given up front and it's not handed out for individual invoices. So last year they did come before the Board of Selectmen to approve them retaining that money.
And we don't have to go through the board. It's not a Board of Finance decision. It's strictly us. Okay.
Have we ever had any other town board or commission or entity come forward and ask to
No,
roll the money over?
anyone
Any
else
surplus?
wouldn't have given any of the money back. They would have just kept it and said that they spent it.
Well, a board or commission, it would have came back. And it's different because the fire company is this outside organization technically.
So it's
even
more
though
like
fire-
the Wheeler Library or the
Right.
ambulance association. They get the lump sum up front. So the fire company's letting us know they didn't spend it all and can they keep it? So it's a nice thing.
And it's 4,000 and change.
449012.
So I would make a motion to allow the North Stonington Volunteer Fire Company to roll over their balance of $4,490.12.
Okay, I would second that motion. Any other discussion? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor of allowing the fire company to retain a balance of $4,490.12, say aye. Aye. Okay, 3-0. So, Chief, thank you. You explained that much better than I would have been able to.
Thank you.
I appreciate you being online. Thanks. Okay. Okay. Now, apropos, opera funds update and discussion. So I was talking to Christine about this, and she was talking to me about it, and she made a good point. We have some things that are coming to a close. Some places where we put opera funding, earmarked opera funding for projects that now the project or the whatever it was for is come to an end, and there's money left over, and we don't really have a policy on how to get it back into the opera fund. We call it the general account. We know it when the demolition's over, hopefully there'll be money left there that'll go back into the opera funds general account, but then the town, then the Board of Selectmen, the town, the Board of Finance decide, how do we want to reallocate that? How do we want to earmark that for something else? Luckily, we have enough in the account now to cover the $7,000 we just spoke about. But moving forward, we have monies coming back from a few different things. So there's a little money left over from the community conversation we had back on January 15th.
Do we
that
have a
wasn't spent.
list? Is there a list in here? Then I'm,
In your packet is the full, COVID grants balance sheet
Okay.
of what's been expended. And I brought, what was approved, so we can talk about what was approved versus what was spent.
Okay, again, so just to give you a couple of examples, and you can look at the sheet. The COG, we told them that we would earmark, there's about $10,000 for them to be paid over a 4-year term. They would bring on a specialist that would help all towns with how to spend your ARPA funding. That specialist was there for a year. ARPA funding get a little bit easier because they made that decision that allowed us to use it for the demolition, that we could use it for lost revenue in a town. By doing that, this position wasn't quite as important, and after a year, they felt that she was no longer needed, and she decided that they would part ways with the COG. So we still have 3 years of payments due to the COG. I emailed Amanda today to ask her, you don't have that person anymore. What are we giving you the money for? And she said, no, we're not going to take that money. We're not asking for any more money. You keep that.
And where is, what number is that on here?
Um,
7.1 SCCOG
Oh,
planner.
okay,
yeah,
so that's the 25 that we had.
25, 23, right? So that was a yearly amount of money that we earmarked for 4 years in a row. We paid the first year. Now we have 3 years left that we don't have to pay. So that money would go back into ARPA funding. The community conversation that we had on the demo and ARPA funding back in January of earlier this year, that all that money wasn't spent. So that money's sitting out there.
Now, would that be used for the POCD?
Well, it
Community
could be, but I think
conversation.
it has to go back to, that's the whole idea about having a policy. I think once you earmark something, once that particular thing comes to an end, we should put it back into the general fund and then vote to earmark it again. Because that would be, even if it's POCD, it's not the same conversation. It's a different conversation.
Okay, I thought like community conversations for whatever community conversation.
I just think to keep it clean, I think it makes the most sense so that people know what we're doing by, okay, we didn't spend it all, we're gonna put it back and we're gonna re-earmark it. Could go back to another community conversation, or maybe it goes back to something we feel is even more important. So I think that just to let it sit there
So-
for the next community conversation
So
doesn't make sense.
What are the few that we're talking? Because I know like the rec in certain, they just haven't spent theirs. Same with EDC. They have
So-
that time frame. So what
So
can I
the
put a
ones
check
that
mark?
we're looking at tonight would be the community conversation where we spent $1,005.93 of $2,000. The COG planner, which we spent $2,523 of $10,092.92.
Wow.
And
Well, there's our resiliency.
and then
Bingo.
also the education center operating for expenses. So we had said not to exceed $120,000 for last year's funds, and we spent $98,517.33. So that's 6.1 ed center operate.
That's for this building.
That's for the operating expenses for last fiscal year. So we can't continue to add to it because it was asked at the town meeting for operating expenses for fiscal year ending
Okay.
June 30th.
So that has to
2022.
go back automatically, just like.
Yes. So I don't know if you guys would want to make motions to consider projects closed and return all remaining funds to the general ARPA funding pool.
And that would be, again, that's just my suggestion to do that. So I think it keeps everything clean. We're not holding it, just moving it. It goes back into the general fund. We have discussions when something comes in front of us, like we did tonight. Then go to the Board of Finance, and if it's over 20,000, go to the board, go to the town meeting again. So I just think it just makes everything clean. It makes everything transparent.
And I think it makes sense too. So for next, if we do something like this for next week, when you go to Board of Finance or Thursday, hopefully. And we know at all the last meetings, they want an actual account of how many dollars are still there. Why leave these in outstanding when we know they're not there? So I would say we don't have it's tough to come up with a time frame, but if we review them every so often
Yeah,
and just turn them back.
I would just say, I can let you know at meetings. So like the next deadline that we know of, the, No Stow Works program, that has a deadline on it of December 31st, 2022. So any funds that are not dispersed at that point, then I would say the first meeting in January, you guys can review and release those funds. And there could be other things in the interim. Hopefully the demo will be done before then.
So basically, it's just like we did last night. It's the obligation of funds. Instead of going into the general fund, they're going back into the ARPA general. fund.
Yeah, so
So-
that's, and that's the question that I was thinking about. We had to go last night. Was it because of the dollar amount that had to go to a town meeting, and that these dollar amounts are not, at least the ones that we're talking about so far? I mean, God willing, we have some money with the demo that's gonna go back in, but that it doesn't have to go to a town
So
meeting.
a lot of the things that we didn't go to town meeting, if they're under 20,000, they never went to town meeting to get the approval. They just went to the Board of Finance. If it was over 20,000, then yes, it did go to the town meeting, but to me, we took that last night to tell me, because my opinion, we took it there because of the value. We looked back at some of the obligations of funds that were done during the Sean Murphy years and the Nick Mullane years, and when there was a large amount of money, they always went to a town meeting. I'm not sure we couldn't have done it at a Board of Selectmen meeting, but because of that, the dollars were so big, I felt more comfortable going to a town meeting.
So instead of a written policy that we'd have to vote on, can we just come up with something where, or maybe it is a policy that we go over this monthly of where we are and whatever's program that Christine says, hey, this deadline's up, then we vote to send that money back? Or are you looking for like a written policy?
Well,
So the reason that we deobligated the things at town meeting last night was because they were established capital projects that had been voted either as part of a budget or as an additional appropriation or transfer. So the process had all been established to create those funds. These are all part of ARPA, not part of the general fund. So that's why this doesn't need to go to a town meeting. So you're not saying these funds can now be released back into the general fund to be spent on something else. They're in a restricted fund. They have to be used for ARPA purposes, anything that's been approved by the federal government. So that's why you can internally release it. And I think just reflecting it in the minutes for the meetings and being consistent in the way that you do it, I think you don't need a written policy to do. I think just being consistent, and we can keep it on old business, just like we have
I agree too.
the
I'd
demo
like
and
to do
everything
that.
else.
all right, so let's just give it an old business, but I'd like to, if you want to use the word deobligate, do that tonight.
Yeah.
Because I'd like to go to the Board of Finance and say, we just did this on Tuesday night to show you how we're gonna operate. So the money goes back in, so everyone gets a look at it again. We have a new total. And then, and now that money could be earmarked for
So-
something else.
So can we have the numbers, the like 1.7, whatever the number is, and the total dollars that would be going back, and then we'll just make a motion based on those dollars? Right?
That sounds fair. As long as Christine can come up with them.
While Christine is doing the math, do we have, quick question, do we have any idea how the EDC is doing as far as getting applications and divvying up the grant money?
I think from last I talked to Sam a little bit, and Bob, you probably know, but they were supposed to have another meeting with some more applications right before
Right, well, their
Nate
last.
left, and then they didn't have a quorum,
Right,
so they haven't met. I think there were another 4 or 3 applications, but they gave out quite a bit, or, I mean, you
there
can
was
look here.
four,
they-
there was 4 they gave out so far. It was a little over $30,000, maybe 35,000, something like that. They gave out on the first
Okay.
tranche of the 4 businesses that asked for money and they got approved.
That's a lot of money left on the table right
There
now,
is,
because they
right.
got 100, right?
And right now they have 2, but that program also is extended. It's going longer than the hiring program that we had.
They are doing a third physical mailing out to the local businesses to say, we're doing the third round of this, please submit
Okay.
your application.
Just, yeah.
Because there's only a few
Just-
things that actually went to town meeting out of ARPA, correct? The business program, the demo, and the fire company.
298.
Yeah,
The
298.
operating
Oh,
budget.
the
Okay.
operating.
I am-
Do you want to table this while she does that and move on? And
We
then we
could.
could
Just,
go back? Oh, you're done? Wow.
Do you want it by program or total?
Maybe by program, and then we could,
Program. Okay, so for the 6.1 community conversation, you would be releasing funds in the amount of $994.07 back into the general ARPA fund. For 6.1 education center operating, you would be releasing $21,482.67. And for 7.1 SCCOG planner, you would be releasing $7,569.92.
for a total of,
For a total of $43,959, and that's a three.
say it again.
number.
What-
Okay, $30,046.66.
$30,046.66.
Yeah.
And I think we have somewhere around $20,000 in there now roughly current.
$20,074.
So this brings it
So,
to close to $50,000 again.
We'll make a motion to expire the programs and return $30,046.66 to the ARPA funding.
I second.
Perfect. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion?
Aside from, COG, everybody else knows that we're asking for this money back? I mean, like, the community conversation people, are they not? That committee isn't thinking that they have 900 and some
No.
odd dollars left to use in the future for another
I'm
community
not sure they
conversation.
know, but they can always come to us and, or we can even originate that. During POCD, we were gonna form this, if we're gonna get the community conversation going again, we can always entertain that motion again, so.
And for the POCD, hopefully you would spend the money out of the POCD capital line first. We may need all of that for consulting fees, but we may not. So that's another funding source for those.
So did we take a vote?
No, we
No,
just, that was
that was
additional discussion.
discussion.
Okay, if there's any other, no other additional discussion, all those in favor of returning this money that was previously earmarked back to the ARPA fund, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, perfect. I just think that's a better, more clean way to do things, and then we're starting from scratch again. Thank you.
Or you wait till the end, like the Stop and Shop receipt, when you put in your code at the end, you see how much you really save.
How much you save?
Okay, something I forgot to mention earlier, just to know, you do, I think I mentioned to you before in an email, our tax collector is starting on the 21st of November, which is a great thing for us. She's coming in on Friday at 12:30 this week, because she's off to meet some of their future fellow employees and kind of get to see town hall. That'd be great. And we have extended our search for a planner. So far, we have not got results, but it's still gonna be out there for a while. But we are on other sites that we weren't on originally, so hopefully for the best. In the meantime, we've contracted with COG for a minimum of 3 months to have a part-time planner. Okay, back on track. Window installation, John Dean Gallup House. So this is something I am gonna have to go to the Board of Finance for, and we will have to go for. As you know, we bought windows, and we put an RFP out to get someone to put in the windows, and when we put the RFP out a while back, we had no takers, nobody applied. So we wanted to get the windows in before the winter time, and I started approaching local people to see if I could find someone that could do it. So I approached 4 local builders, all live in North Stonington. 1 I didn't get an answer from. 2, they said they were too busy, possibly in the spring, but they couldn't do it now. And the 4th one could do it now and on time, and get it and start in there probably around the 8th or 9th of November and get them in before it got too cold. So, and that was Shamrock Builders. The total dollars for the windows and the installation, which includes exterior trim, interior trim, weather stripping, reforming the window openings if they're not exactly correct, and cleanup, comes out to roughly $7,000 more than what monies we put aside for the project. We have had obviously increases in inflation in all areas, and we're kind of up against it at this point. So I want to go to the Board of Finance and ask for an additional appropriation or a line item transfer. Now we have monies in the budget because of the North Stonington Ambulance Association. We budgeted for them $250,000 for the year, and I negotiated with them earlier in the year, and we got it down to $7,000. So there's $43,000 available in the budget that I can use as a line item transfer to somewhere else. And I'd like to use approximately $7,000 of that money to get this done. So it's done. It's done before. We promised the The tenant that we have it done before the winter, he's paying for his own oil. And we know what a gallon of oil costs these days. I think it makes sense to get it done sooner instead of later. We do have someone locally that can do it. Said I did approach multiple local people after doing an RFP. So I think we did our due diligence there. And I just wanted to have that discussion with the Board of Selectmen this evening to vote to allow me to take this to the Board of Finance to do a line item adjustment out of the Northern Ambulance Association line item and transfer it over to the Do It Farm line item.
I'll make that motion.
Is that a standard thing that we transfer money from one line item to another? Is that all within our?
Completely appropriate. It's in my opinion, better if you can transfer rather than asking for an additional appropriation. If you know that you have additional funds, which we normally don't, in any of the line items that you can move rather than asking to take more money than you had originally budgeted for the year, it's preferable. So since we knew going in after the budget had been approved that this money was there, rather than asking for it to come from the undesignated fund, we know somewhere that we're going to have unspent funds when we get to the end of the year. Just for your records, the capital line, which is C 3.35 1750 farmhouse, has $53,734.33 in it as of right now. We're asking for a transfer of $7,100 to cover the purchase of the windows and the installation. And the windows have been ordered and will be here
Next week,
next week.
So the grand total for the windows is,
do you have that total with you, Christine?
About $60,800 for the windows and the installation.
We have approximately 53,000 left in that budget for that, correct?
we have nothing else. So that will drain the 1750
That this-
line item.
Yes, but this was the project that was designated for this fiscal year. So we had budgeted 55,000 for the windows and window purchase and installation. We had the bulkhead repaired because that was a safety concern. So that's the funds that have come out that have made it 53,000 and change.
And how about that back?
That'll be in next year's budget.
Okay,
we can't
that's
because-
safe right now, though?
Yes, it's safe. If we had, if we got this in at a lower number, if the RFP would have come back 3 months ago when we first asked for it, we probably would have had a lower number because the inflation wouldn't have taken
Yeah.
as much effect. We may have had money to work on that. I do have a quote on that, but it's not feasible for this year. It was around $13,000. It's not feasible this year to get it done when we can appropriate money next year for it in next year's budget.
So if anything were to happen to the 1750 house that the town would be needing to pay for, we would have to go for an additional appropriation at this point.
We would, if something dire happened to it, but
Yeah.
you could say that about pretty much anything in town.
The capital line for the 1750s farmhouse is designed to have specific projects intended for the funds. Rather than town building maintenance and repair, which is more something breaks, we fix it. This is, we pick this project, we know it's going, we hope it's going to cost this much and costs have just gone.
But we do have monies in, right, town building. And
Yes.
So we do have monies in other line items that are there for those, but this is more of a specific capital line item.
And I'm sorry, tell me one more time, the ambulance fund that is
It
not
It was
being.
budgeted at $250,000. Shortly after that, I was able to negotiate with them to get it down to $207,000.
Okay,
So it's a $43,000 win for the town.
and they know they do
Yes.
not have that
Oh,
$43,000.
they know. They know that.
Okay.
Yep. It's
All
part of the, it was part of the agreement.
And this is only to, we're only moving it to the Board of Finance. We're approving to move the
Right.
question to
And
move
and
the
I would do
line
this
item.
at their, and I would do this at their regular meeting, not,
Yeah,
not the special meeting on Thursday we're gonna ask for.
okay.
Are we in discussion or? Did
I
someone
don't think
second
we've
my
made-
motion?
I don't think we've made a motion
I
yet.
made a motion.
Did you?
And then you guys started discussing, so I just want to clarify.
Yeah,
Did
we
Bob
got a second.
second it?
I seconded the
Okay,
motion.
Oh, you did?
sorry. So that was all discussion.
I seconded the motion and then that was discussion.
Good.
Okay.
Just checking.
replay the tape.
I'm good.
I'll watch it tomorrow morning. I'm pretty sure I did. Okay, so any other discussion? Okay, so all in favor of Board of Selectmen approving going to the Board of Finance for an additional, well, not an additional provisional line item transfer from the NSAA line item number
P 2612,
to the Ewart Farm capital line item.
C 3.35.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. And again, Christine, I think I'm gonna do that on their regular meeting on Wednesday. Okay. Transfer requests. These are the transfer requests from the tax office.
You just did the transfer request.
Did?
That wasn't.
Oh,
under-
sorry.
That wasn't under the window
You're right. I was thinking
installation
it was tax refunds. I'm confused. No,
It,
it's all
it-
set.
it was those two items kind of were combined,
together.
but we
No.
itemized them on the agenda.
Correct. All right. Next, budget timeline.
Can I talk about it?
So that's in your packet.
Can you be not that excited about it?
Can I talk about it?
It's in my packet somewhere.
Oh, God, didn't we just do the budget?
Yes. Starts all over again as soon as you finish.
Just to
Alright.
go in the corkboard in my office and just check off the boxes as we hit each date. So Christine just wanted to bring it to our meeting tonight to have you look at it, have an idea what it looks like. If you see anything on there that might jump out at you, that a date that maybe wouldn't work. It's very similar to last year's. I think we gave the Board of Ed, as we are again this year, giving them a little bit extra time, like they asked for last year. We had groups present both to the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance at the same time, which we'll do. The boards haven't really changed, so I won't be doing the tours we did last year with the new members at the transfer station and firehouses we did. But other than that, it's pretty much identical to last year. As you see, the Board of Ed doesn't present until March 15th, which is well after pretty much everybody else has presented. But as they say, a lot of they have trouble looking forward until later in the year, because that's when they get a lot of their information in. And they need that extra time. I'm sure on their side, they'll be doing their meetings with the administrators and the superintendent and so on. But they won't actually come to the Board of Finance until the 15th of March.
So some items of note, the public hearing is on Monday, April 17th. That is a week later than last year because the public school break works with us. So the public school break is the week before that. I'm having you review it at this meeting, and then the Board of Finance will review it at their next meeting to make sure that everyone is in agreement with the schedule so that we can let all boards, departments, boards and commissions and committees know what the deadlines are. It is the second Friday in January, so that people that only meet on the first week or the second week of the month have the opportunity to approve their budgets before they are submitted. The Board of Finance at their next two meetings will be finalizing the form that's going to be sent out to all of the boards, commissions, departments, committees, everybody that asks for money, so that they're not getting a secondary request. We will be building the budget in Excel again this year, which is fine. We have no issues with that. I think we've figured out a format that will work. I will be adding the column that we had midway through that talks about the percentage increase or decrease from the current approved budget for each line item. And this follows the annual town meeting being the first Monday in May. So if there's any changes that you all want to make, we just have to keep in mind when Memorial Day falls, since we typically do the referendum 2 weeks after the annual town meeting.
Okay. Any discussion? We don't have to adopt this, correct?
No.
No,
I'm just looking at the,
just looking, reviewing.
Technically, the Board of Finance owns the budget
right, so,
schedule. I do think and we've gone back and forth, Christine, a few times over the years, but I mean, January 13th might be a little early for boards and commissions to actually talk about it, discuss it, because it is a process that they need to vote on these things. So being on boards and commissions over for years, I know those last few weeks in December, not a lot gets done. And it's hard to get people to do it. So if they're coming into one meeting and trying to vote on their budget, you know, if these are the dates, it's gonna be hard for, well, you'll have to get it out to the boards and commissions that they're gonna have to start working on their budget November, December. I think it's tough. So, I mean, the Board of Finance handbook has a schedule in there that they recommend. It's not quite as aggressive as this one, but they don't have as many meetings as we have planned on these. That's my only hesitation, is I think that Friday, January 13th is a little tight to get all your boards and commissions that actually do it properly, have a meeting, discuss it, and vote on it to send it to us on the municipal side. But
I think, so, are we able to vote and approve this and move it forward to Board of Finance as the suggested budget
Why don't,
timeline?
as Christine said, I don't think we have to vote on it. I think she's gonna present it to the Board of Finance.
Okay,
They're the ones.
so
that-
this is just for our review tonight.
Right, so it says Wednesday, December 7th, the Board of Finance discussion of budget process and timeline.
It's gonna happen before that. This I think is, so the December 7th, December 14th feedback process timeline, I think it's more what they're looking for the budgets, and if there's anything, anything informationally that you all are looking for from people presenting to you, because anyone that's not listed on here to give an actual presentation, everything that they are giving you is in a written format. So we need to be very clear with people to how they should be justifying what their budget ask is. Not having people just say, I want 2% more than
Right.
last year,
Yeah.
really justifying
And
that
I
they
think-
need every penny.
Yeah, and I think that we certainly heard Board of Finance members say that they wanted an ask, and that they knew and understood that they were gonna need to get on the stick and get that ask out there ahead of time, so that people knew when they were coming, that they wanted to see, how did you spend the money you were given last year? And justifying what you're asking for this year. So I think that if you can get it out, if Board of Finance votes on this at their next, do you think it's an agenda item on their next?
It'll be a discussion item on their next meeting. I don't know that they will finalize. And we also need to have the format that they're looking for.
Yeah.
right, because they did say
Yeah,
that they were
did-
gonna come up
talked
with
of- Yeah, so I mean, I think that if they can get it done, oh my God, I was literally just gonna say by the end of October, thinking that we had a couple of weeks to go, and obviously we don't, but I think that you're exactly right. I think that by mid-November, conversations in boards and commissions needs to start about the process.
Right. And I think land use might have a little more difficulty this year. Because that was something that Juliet and Nate did a lot of. And January 13th is much better than the first week like it was a few years ago. The only other thing that I would bring up that I have to say that I don't love about the layout of this budget process, and I understand the reasoning behind it, but that Public Works or EDC or land use, they go over their requests with us and Board of Finance at the same time. Now, I know that was changed to cut down on redundancy of that. The problem I have with it is that the budget that the selectmen are sending over could be totally different than what their request is. So we approve the budget to move it forward to the Board of Finance. Part of me thinks that the Board of Finance doesn't have to be there for those meetings, because what if us as a board don't want to move some of those expenditures forward? So years ago, they would present to the Board of Selectmen. Board of Selectmen would go through the budget And then they would present and they would ask some of the departments to come in to go over that stuff with the Board of Finance compared to everyone hearing it at the same time. So it takes away that, it can cause some confusion if they hear something presented in this need, and then the Board of Selectmen doesn't move that budget exactly like that forward to the Board of Finance. It does cause some chaos. And I'm just thinking that when I was on the Board of Finance, it does create a little gray area.
I think that if I'm a board and I'm standing in front of both the selectmen and the Board of Finance, I can hear their feedback all at once. There's no reason why we can't voice our feedback during that meeting and try and understand where Board of Finance is coming from. I just think it just seems to me to be a more efficient process so that we're hearing what the Board of to move something forward with Public Works, only to hear that the Board of Finance are going to say, absolutely not. You need to cut $25,000 out of that. I think I would rather have that be all done and heard in one meeting.
But it could work the opposite way too. And I don't know if that's good or bad, but if we decide that we don't want to put something in that budget because we're looking at the picture on the municipal side.
Yeah.
And then they lobby the Board of Finance separately at that meeting, it goes against how the budget structure really was always set up and how it works. And if you look at most other towns, and I know we don't like to compare, but that's how it works, because it's almost like you in your hospital, you would go to your department, you wouldn't go through the ultimate decision-making body for your budget in your department,
So.
bypassing your department heads.
So I think
Right.
because of the timeline, and I also think the fact that the Board of Finance then gets to hear the original budget before we work on it. And as Nicole said, we get to hear some of the feedback from the Board of Finance, negative or positive. If they present it to us and we cut their budget, the Board of Finance never heard the original budget. So I think if they hear the original budget and we made cuts and we identify these are where we cut, at least they heard the original. They might say, hey, we think you should put something back in. They everything's the Board of Finance is one that always takes things out, but they also can ask to have something put back in. So I think it's good to have them hear the original budget, then we make our cuts, come back and we explain why we thought as a board, why these things had to change. And again, the Board of Finance is going to be out, we know, I think it's the month of March, every Wednesday for that month. And there's a lot of meetings that go on. It just makes it a little bit more streamlined to have us do it in one night. But I understand what you're saying, Brett, but I think I'd like to have the Board of Finance hear the original ask, and then we'll come back to them when we change, if we change it, and say, this is why we changed it.
One thing that you could do, because we do record the meetings, you could just have selectmen's meetings and the Board of Finance can watch them either live or after the fact. And it wouldn't be a Board of Finance meeting, it would be a Board of Selectmen meeting. And then that way they're not weighing in on what the presentation is, because anybody that's not presenting, the Board of Finance isn't seeing their original ask. They're seeing the
Right.
Board of Selectmen's budget.
So in a future Board of Finance meeting, why don't I ask the Board of Finance for their feedback on that? Would they like to have joint meetings, or would they prefer to have us have the meeting as a Board of Selectmen meeting and then go back and on their own time review the meeting? Of course, they can't ask questions that way. They can only review it. But we can get feedback from them and see how they want to handle it.
Because how does it technically work that, say we have that meeting and Board of Finance doesn't have a quorum? But if we call them as Board of Selectmen meetings, presentations to us, they can be there,
But
but we don't
can't-
have to worry about quorums at that point.
Right, but then they can't speak as a board. They can't vote on anything, which they wouldn't.
Which they don't
Right.
typically anyway. Because I don't even know
They
if the
can't
Board of
conduct
Finance
board
asked a lot of questions in those initial ones.
So
Yeah.
if we have it as a Board of Selectmen meeting and they do have a quorum, that puts us in a tough spot, because then if they're a quorum, it's not called as a Board of Finance meeting, but they're there and they're start asking questions as a board, now
Right.
they're in a legal meeting.
Well, no, they're not in a legal meeting. So
Well, we're
long
not
as,
either.
that's where there's a lot of confusion. As long as they're not they can't vote on anything, but they can have the amount of members at a meeting that has a quorum, as long as it's a noticed meeting of another board, they can be there.
But I
But they
always,
can't conduct board business.
Yeah,
So-
listen-
No, well, they can't vote on anything. They can ask questions.
Listen to that FOI meeting is that, because this happened, we were at a meeting, but we didn't speak. If we would have spoken, started asking
Well,
questions.
that's because that wasn't a noticed meeting. So the rule is if you have a publicly noticed meeting, you can have technically more than a quorum of another board there. And they can speak, they just can't vote on it because it's a it's all about publicly noticed meetings.
Yeah.
That FOI thing was that there wasn't any
As
notice.
long
of
as
a
we do it
meeting.
right, I really
Right.
don't care.
Yeah,
Just
I
do
mean,
it.
I am in favor of having a joint meeting and hearing. I do understand that it can, I just think that the benefits outweigh the potential negative effects.
So we've taken this under consideration, we discussed it, and we'll have the Board of Finance look at it, and they'll have, come up with a decision, and we'll give them our input, so
Cause they might totally change this calendar
They
for all
could.
we know.
they could. Okay,
Right.
can we move on at this point? Next. All right, so our meeting schedule. So I took the meeting schedule and went to the second and fourth Tuesdays of every month. The only thing I came up with, which was a conflict, was in February. So it seems like our first meeting was February 14th. Somebody in this room thought that wasn't a good idea. So I decided, well, it's not a good idea. We'll move it to the 7th and the 28th. I ask you guys if you think February 14th is a good night or a bad night to have a meeting. Other than that, everything fell into place nicely. And I went to one meeting in December, which is what we usually do. We don't do two meetings in December because of the holidays. So and I kept the meetings at 6:30, unless you'd like to change that, and they kept the meetings in this room, which we probably would stay here. Well, is there any reason to change off the second and fourth Tuesdays? Make that one change in February from the 14th to the 7th, leave one meeting in December and keep them at 6:30, and we can discuss.
I wouldn't mind, I know I'm probably the single person here, but I wouldn't mind moving them to 6. Just because 6:30 is, it's kind of it's hard to go and have, this sounds silly, but go and have dinner and then come to a meeting, or I would rather just come from work, come to a meeting, get done a little earlier, and then go on with what's going on. But I'm fine leaving at 6:30. I just think 6 could be more streamlined for things.
I just think, in this case, since Christine has the travel, but no,
I'm
either
fine
way,
with whatever time. I have rec at 6:15. I have you guys 6:30. I have Board of Finance at 7. Whatever works.
I am concerned that with my new job that I may not, it'll be tight sometimes. I would worry, I would have to start the meeting on Zoom in the car.
That was my whole point. Just kidding.
No.
Then I'm comfortable leaving them at 6:30.
Yeah.
why don't we leave them at 6:30, and if it gets to be a problem, we just have to have some special meetings at different times, but I appreciate I could work with either one, 6 or
Yeah.
6:30. It really is depending on the other people on the board.
It
so.
would be nice during budget season if the Board of Finance would move their meetings a little earlier than 7, so they can get done before 11.
Yeah. Okay, so
So,
do we
we
have to
need a
adopt
motion?
this evening? We do. So anybody have a problem with moving the February 14th meeting to February 7th? Okay.
Nope.
All right, other than that, then I would,
Make a motion to approve schedule as presented by Bob Carlson.
I second that.
great. So as presented, all those in favor say aye.
I,
Aye. We'll give you a copy of this tomorrow, and then we can make a hard copy and give it to Antoinette. Correct? Perfect. So now we are on tax refunds. In the past, we've just lumped these together. I don't mind doing that again if you'd like to. We can read off the names and just do a total dollar value.
Can I just ask a question before we do that?
Sure.
So a lot of times I just breeze through these when I look. Is there a reason why that we don't check off any of the conditions of why we're doing the refunds or abatement?
That would be a question for the tax collector who doesn't exist right now. So we can make sure the next tax collector does that.
Yeah, the nice thing is this is the last one we'll do with this particular tax collector, the new one.
So I would just ask that in the future, because it asks, it has for people that are listening, there's a checklist of why we're doing this exemption. And I noticed, and I don't know if I just never looked before, and I just went through and looked at the names and the dollars, but then I read, this is why we're giving the tax exemption, and there's checklists, and there's never anything checked on, at least on these.
I'm gonna say 90% of the time, these ones, it's the last reason.
Yeah,
refund of
129
Excess
Refund of
payments.
excess payment.
Uh-huh.
I just think going forward would be nice to know, because then I'm not voting blind. I'm
So
saying,
we-
okay, well, they overpaid, so this is why we're doing it.
So I'll mention it to the new tax collector to see if we can get those checked off, so we'll have that.
Perfect.
That's a good suggestion. That way we know. In case it is something other than 129, we can ask the question, why? Okay,
So did you say you wanted each name
I would say. if
read
we-
off?
I think if we
We
just
do it as a lump.
individual, read the names, but then do a total at the end, just one thing.
Okay, so I will make a motion to approve, the tax refunds for, it's Martine, Rochman, another Martine Rochman, Donald Sherman, and Ally Financial, for a grand total of, $2,448.60.
So move.
Okay, so it's motion's been motioned and seconded by Brett. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of approving these tax refunds as read, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, minutes,
I'll make a motion to approve minutes
perfect.
as written.
Second,
I read every bit when I approve the minutes. You're just gonna say,
he
I approve the minutes as
he
written.
sat on your birthday cake,
Right?
yes, he did. That's your job.
She did the tax. Sometimes I do the tax, so I figured I'd help out. If you want to read all the minutes aloud, is that what you're
Oh,
asking?
no.
She
just
she wants to read the
The
date.
specific date and time for the.
I'll make a
official minute.
motion to approve the minutes for the Board of Selectmen meeting, October 11th, 2022 at 6:30 PM. That was held at the North Stonington Education Center and through Zoom.
I second that.
Perfect. Any other discussion?
Do we have, oh, no, we don't. Okay,
Any other discussion? None?
no.
All in favor of approving the minutes as stated by Selectman Mastriani, say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed?
We have a public comment hand.
Okay, perfect.
Ryan, thank you for hanging in.
Yeah, can you hear me?
us?
My only comment is I couldn't hear a lot of the meeting. And it seemed like it was like, I could hear Brett really well. Of course, Bob, you were lighter than Brett, but then it went to Nicole, which I could hear, and I knew Christine was talking, but I couldn't hear her. I didn't know if that's because of the way the setup is, or.
It could be. We can have Jim test the mics again. This happened a few weeks ago and he came in and tested them and changed some things around. So can you hear
Yeah,
me right now pretty clearly?
Yeah, I heard you just then. I didn't
Yeah.
know if they had 4 separate controls that one goes loud, one goes soft or something, but.
Brian, I think what it is that we need to lean into the mics and put them close. So I noticed during the Board of Finance meetings and the Board of Ed meetings, it is extremely difficult to
Yeah,
hear
I-
people talking unless they're close to the mics. Christine, I can usually always hear you, and you can always hear everybody that's zoomed in that's calling, but it's extremely difficult to hear people unless they lean in. So maybe we need to just be more conscious of it.
I actually, thank you, Brian. Can you hear me now?
I hear you now, yeah.
Try
Yeah,
turning
you
your
said,
mic
you
toward-
said you said
Not,
you could hear.
not as clear as the other guys.
Turn your mic toward you. Now lean in a little bit.
So, okay, all right. So Brian, sometimes I'm concerned about like our Ps, and sometimes it makes such a loud noise that sometimes I turn the mic sideways, but I will absolutely agree with you, listening from home to the Board of Ed and the Board of Finance, I find it really difficult to hear people. So, but see, it back feeds. So I will make a conscious effort, Brian. Thank you, because I do know that it's difficult to hear from home sometimes.
Thank you. And the woman that spoke tonight about the deep, I couldn't make out hardly anything she was saying. So I didn't know if that was on another different
That
line.
mic is not nearly as loud as ours are.
All right,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Brian, thank you. We will do what we
Thank
can
you,
to make
Brian.
things
all
clear.
right. Have a good evening.
I actually wish you had heard what she said because it was very interesting. So, but thank you.
Appreciate you hanging in there.
I'm just trying to figure out how I put the
Okay.
lower hand. Yeah.
Okay, our next meeting, so the next meeting is actually scheduled for November 8th, which can't happen because there'll be voting taking place in this room. So, I propose that we cancel the meeting on December 8th, meet on the 15th. And then the next date we're supposed to meet is the 22nd, but if we don't need to meet, we could either cancel the 22nd, move it to the 29th, just have it on the 22nd and forget the 29th. But I think we should at least meet on the 15th, because the 8th, this room will not be available.
Do you think we need to meet on the 15th and not just do the 22nd instead?
Since the 15th is going to be, there's a lot of moving parts between now and then with the Board of Finance, what's going on with the Board of Finance, what Beth talked about this evening. I would hate to, put it this way, if we get to the 12th or the 13th and the agenda is not piling up as it did tonight, I'm not opposed to canceling a meeting.
The only reason I asked is because then it'd be a special meeting that we have to call on that.
And
so,
that the only thing with the special meeting is we just can't add to it, but.
Right.
But I would think if we, at this, just book the 15th for now. And then if we can cancel, if there's not a lot going on, we can just meet on the 22nd and forget about the 15th.
Okay.
If we meet on the 15th, then I would think maybe we can talk about canceling the 22nd, meet on the 29th, if we have to, but can we all say that we're not going to meet on the 8th
We're not going to meet on the 8th.
and we'll schedule the 15th and see if we need it? How's that? Make
Yeah.
sense?
Or schedule the 15th if we need it. It's all the same. Yeah, that sounds great to me. Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, second. He said motion to adjourn.
Oh, I
said
thought
second.
yeah,
I
So
said
all in
second.
favor?
You want to say third?
I'm in favor of adjourning.
Oh, adjourn. Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Oh,
Bye,
the
Brian.
Meeting ended at